Welcome back to a We the People Institute's Constitution reading plan. We are now in week 4 where we're going to be talking about Articles 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now, you may have heard this. America was kind of founded on this idea of equality. It was founded on the idea that you and I are equal, especially in the eyes of the law. Now, this actually transferred to the states as well, and this is actually outlined in our Constitution. Article 4 establishes that each state is actually equal to another. This means that California and Oklahoma, though you may have your own personal beliefs, the law views them as equal, and the Constitution views them as equal. The laws in one state must be recognized by another. So if I move to another state, I now must recognize those laws. I must now follow the laws that are listed in that state, even if they were different in the state that I'm from. Now, back in those days, there was actually a large uproar about whether we needed to be one nation or essentially a region of just many states that had kind of a treaty going on among them. This is actually where the Articles of Confederation, which was the original governing document of America, differed, because it kind of just viewed each state as kind of equal to each other, but we're not really going to enforce anything upon you. And the Constitution decided, no, we are a nation of states. But so this actually led to the idea of the Federalist Papers, which we talked about last week. But these were newspaper editorials written by the 3 founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. You've probably heard of them, at least from us or from some other source out there. But these argued for the need of one centralized government that is over many equal states. Now, after battling over many ideas, such as the form of government for each state, what to do in cases of war on a particular state, meaning that if Mexico attacks Florida or something, what happens there? Do the other states help? And whether each state would be equal, Article 4 was written, which established one central government and the equality among every state formed then, as well as every state formed afterwards, meaning that those 13 original states have no more power in America than the states that have come after that. And this is an issue that is seen throughout America today, is that we the people can actually not do anything about Congress or its power today.
Right, and this is something that the founders combated, and especially in Article 5 of the Constitution. So in Article 5 of the Constitution, essentially there is a way for the states within America to amend the Constitution, completely bypassing federal branches of government such as Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court. Now, it's very difficult to do this, but it is definitely something that's there so that if there is ever something that needs to be amended, we can do it by passing the federal government if they are tyrannical or corrupted.
Exactly. And so then we move on into Article 6, which is actually very similar to Article 4. It was whether or not the federal government should be assuming the debts of the states, or whether that was something each state should have to do themselves. In fact, it was kind of a question of, should Virginia be bailing out New York just because they have debts, or whether or not? Well, so Alexander Hamilton argued vehemently, or essentially very passionately, for the idea that if we are to be one nation, the debts must fall on the central government rather than the states. Now, this would benefit the country as a whole, because then we would be sharing the burden as a nation rather than force certain states into poverty. Essentially, the idea was, if one state fails, we all fail. And so also, by assuming the debts of the states, they decided that the federal government should then have the power of being the supreme law of the land. So what this means is that the Constitution and all the laws passed by Congress dictate the laws of the nation as a whole. So that means that California, Florida, Oklahoma, New York, every single state is underneath the federal government, and therefore they all must follow the Constitution and the laws passed by them. Now also, an oath was actually outlined in Article 6, and this was incredibly important to the Founding Fathers. Essentially what this oath is talking about is what they're promising to be upholding. They're promising to be upholding our liberties, our freedoms, our rights. And they believe that by swearing to uphold the office in the eyes of God, they actually can then be held to that standard. Essentially, they recognize that you and I as humans, we sin, but God never does. And God can actually give us eternal repercussions for failing to uphold our oaths, whereas we as people cannot. So what they believed was that the repercussions were so strong by swearing an oath basically unto God, that no honest man would ever want to disobey that oath or ever go against that oath, because then they would be facing those kinds of repercussions.
So that brings us to then Article 7 of the Constitution, the last article within the Constitution. And it essentially wraps it up by just explaining how many of the 13 states were necessary in order to ratify the Constitution. This is pretty much just necessary just to outline how many people needed to agree in order for this to become the supreme law of the land, essentially. And every state did eventually ratify the Constitution. Now, the Constitution is different from the Declaration of Independence because of the fact, well, for one, the Constitution was ratified, and secondly, by that point, the states were united by the point of the Constitution, and specifically where we get to the point of Article 7 of the Constitution. So, in conclusion, for all of the articles that we just mentioned today, the Constitution is definitely an incredible document, and this is the foundation. We just finished the foundation of the Constitution together, so applaud yourselves. But like anything else, it wasn't perfect at this point, which is why we're going to get into later episodes. We're going to start diving into the amendments of the Constitution, so stay tuned for those. Thank you so much for tuning in.